We will now interrupt your regularly scheduled programming for this Good Old Blades micro podcast.
In order to appreciate the Knifemakers Guild's importance in American knife history, it's important to contextualize the early 70s and 60s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, and how chaotic or regional knife sales were in America. Other than knife makers that had contracts with like Abercrombie and Fitch and other magazines and distributors that sold cutlery of some sort, the individual knife maker didn't have a lot of avenues to pursue knife sales outside of their town or city in those times. And the predominant focus in America when it came to shows was guns. All right. So a few knife makers got together in 1970-ish and formed the Knifemakers Guild and started incorporating tables with existing gun shows in order to give knife makers an avenue to sell. Now, as the Knifemakers Guild started to grow, more and more people signed up, and they were able to establish their own set of shows to promote handmade knife making. One interesting thing about the Guild is that in addition with promoting handmade knives, they also had a process of arbitration whereby the Guild would help assist customers in any type of arguments or disputes between customers and makers to make sure that everybody was fully satisfied with the work that they were given by a maker. The inspection and expectation process of a maker's work was part of the purview of the Guild as well. So those that joined the Guild were expected to grind their own bevels, to play the largest part in every aspect of the knife that was being made, and that it attained a certain quality level. And that's important to note because the Guild over this period of time to current date has had a lot of different faces, a lot of different board members, a lot of different focuses, but at the core has always been to promote the knowledge share and expectation of high quality knives amongst the handmade community of knife makers. And in its current state, the Knifemakers Guild would probably be considered old guard, especially with the advent of the internet, because it's no longer necessary, obviously, to go to a knife show in order to be able to promote your work. However, there's been a paradigm shift in the Guild's focus to more of the knowledge share, camaraderie, and raising the bar of expectations around knife makers that it doesn't really exist in the wild so much. If you're an individual knife maker and you're just going direct from learning the craft to sales, there really is a focus on promoting really good craftsmanship. And that's one of the reasons why I joined the Guild. Not only is because there's been a lot of honorable and fantastic makers that have been part of the Guild, but it really is to promote the history, knowledge share, and quality standards that I believe still exist in knives and are still promoted by the Guild. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how to join the Guild and what that inspection process looks like and everything like that. Now, the best place to start if you're looking at joining the Knifemakers Guild is to go to the website and go to the Join the Guild page. You'll get to see the bylaws and read through them, and also look at the requirements and obligations to be a part of the Guild. The most important thing is that you have your application process starts with your probationary membership. So you have to have 4 voting members in good standing that look at your work and sign your application based on the quality of your work. And if they will vouch for you, then you can take that application to an officer at a guild designated meeting, which at this point is Blade Show Texas and Blade Show Atlanta. And sometimes I don't know if they actually have a Blade like the Blade West or Blade Utah set up to accept it, but it just depends if board members are present at those shows whether you can submit applications. But the current person who's in charge of recruiting is Les Adams, and you can reach directly out to him and start the process as well. Usually, a guild member will be able to help you work through the process of finding members in your area, and you can also use the member directory on the website, which will help you, learn who's around you. Maybe talk to the makers and get to know them better, and also get some advice on your work. So that way, when you go through the application process, you have a higher likelihood of it being accepted. But at the very least, you have to have 4 members that sign your application. And then when all of that is done, then you can go to a show and submit 4 handmade knives for inspection. Now, the inspection process for probationary members, when you submit your application, you'll go before a board of inspectors. Typically, it's two people that are looking at your knives, sometimes 3, and they will just kind of take the knife apart, like break it down into its core components, fit, finish, and so on and so forth, and give you commentary on things that you might need to improve on, and they will ultimately decide on whether your knife is of quality to be considered for probationary member status. Assuming that you pass that step, then at the designated guild meeting, they will vote and they will vote you in as a probationary member, and you have to wait until the next designated meeting to be accepted as a voting member status. Now, some of these things are subject to change because the bylaws are a little bit outdated, and I believe that the standard operating procedure might be a little bit different than what's online. But suffice it to say, it used to be that the waiting period for a probationary member was a lot longer, and it was also commensurate on tables being available for you to exhibit your work, which was a requirement for voting member status as well. Once you're done with the probationary portion of things and you're deemed a probationary member, you will probably experience that the inspectors of your knives had given you some comments on things to fix. Now, take every one of those recommendations to heart, but remember that ultimately the inspectors, even though their opinion is subjective, that there are certain things, certain aesthetics and basic requirements of how a knife should look and feel that you need to pay attention to. Take those things, go back to your shop, either fix the knives that you have if you can, or make new ones, and remember all of the elements that they told you that you should focus on. The next time that you bring knives for voting status, those things should be fixed. So regardless if it's how your bevels are ground, if they're symmetrical, if your finishes are good enough, that the grip finish that you're going for doesn't have lower grip finishes, if you're doing high polishes, or so on and so forth, look correct, that your pins are hit on your bolsters, that your handles are ground symmetrically, all of those things. If you're doing pocket knives, obviously there's all of the elements to liner locks, slip joints, frame locks, so on and so forth. And if you're using those knives to inspect with, make sure that you're following general guidelines for and inspection guidelines for things that you might need to fix. All right. When you come in for voting member status, those things should be corrected. The idea is when you get voting member status, like when you're going up for inspection for that, all of the previous recommendations and flaws should be fixed. Now, with that being said, there are certain things that a knife maker, when they're inspecting your knives, might comment on. Like, this thing would look really good as a tapered tang, and it would help with the weight distribution, or certain aesthetic decisions that you might think about that are not integral to the knife making process, but they are commentary on things that they might recommend. Be aware that some of the commentary is subjective, and that just because the guild member says this would look good as a taper tang doesn't mean you have to come in next time and put a taper tang on a knife. But it's important to it's important to look at those recommendations and decipher which ones are integral components of making a blade and which ones are more like hearsay. All right. So the process for voting member status occurs much like with probationary. You bring 4 knives in for inspection, and if you're granted approval, then they will vote on you in the next meeting, and then you will be inducted as a voting member, and you pay your dues for the year. I believe it's $200 per year. There is an application fee, and I can't remember. It's something like $20 or $50 or something like that. It's fairly nominal, but the idea in the voting member status is what you get in voting member status is you get listed as a voting member on the website. You get 1 vote for called meetings, and you're also able to hold office, like a board of director position, and so on and so forth. So I really encourage you, if you're a serious knife maker and you would like to be inspected and join the ranks of a long history of knife makers that share knowledge, to consider the guild. I know that there's a lot of rhetoric around the guild and the antiquated nature of guilds, especially in the age of the internet. But there are some things that I have learned to appreciate and that have made me a better knife maker that being associated with the guild has done. I will say I haven't been turned away by anybody that is not part of the guild. That everybody in this day and age has been a lot more receptive to those kind of concepts of the early guild, just as a matter of fact. But I still think that there's a lot of history to be carried on, a lot of knowledge that we as makers can share through the guild and transform it into something that really fits into the modern era. So it's something to think about. If you want to join an organization that is changing with the times and that is focusing more on the educational and cross-pollination of ideas, then the guild is definitely somewhere to start. Hope this helps.